Cantrell, and this is Compassionate Journeys, conversations about home care and hospice, presented by Home Health Foundation. I'm joined today by Eric Redard, Volunteer Services Manager at Home Health Foundation. Thank you for joining me.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Eric, I would love to hear more about your job and what brought you to Home Health Foundation to begin with.
Well, as you mentioned, my name's Eric Redard. I'm the Volunteer Services Manager. I've been in this position for about a year and 4 months. Not that I'm counting, but it's been quite a year. A little bit about my background.
Yeah.
I have worked in hospice. Before I was a Volunteer Services Manager, I was a chaplain for Merrimack Valley Hospice and worked in the field for a little bit over a year. And then prior to that, I worked as a parish minister, focusing, helping congregations work with families and focusing on pastoral care and mission. And throughout my career, I've been ordained for 25 years. Really worked in churches, and I've loved working with families, loved working with pastoral care, and learning their stories. And really, that's one thing that brought me to hospice. Previous to working in churches, I did work in hospice. I was a chaplain and bereavement coordinator for another hospice. And then I was also the executive director of Hospice of York about 8 years ago, which eventually partnered with Merrimack Valley Hospice. One of the things that brought me to hospice is really helping patients and families and learning about their stories. Yeah. Believing that everyone has a story, believing that has a story to tell. And I love learning about people's lives. There's valuable information, and helping them through challenges and helping them through struggles is something that I found that I'm good at, and something that I really enjoy.
I think a lot of people don't know exactly what hospice is, or they're a little bit afraid of it.
Yes.
Do you find that you have to educate a lot of people? And if so, what do you say to them?
I think there's a lot of education about hospice that needs to happen. Hospice is a philosophy of care that focuses on comforting care rather than curative measures. I think people think hospice is just for end of life when someone is really eligible to be in hospice with a terminal diagnosis that if left untreated, they would pass in 6 months. So really there is a long time that someone can be in hospice. It's not just for the final weeks or final days of someone's life. And hospice really treats not only the patient but the whole family as a unit. There's a whole support system that is able to come in from nursing care, social work, chaplain, a volunteer, bereavement services, home health aides. There's really a whole team that can come in and help the family deal and travel through this time in their life.
I'm glad you mentioned families, because I've heard clinicians speak too about how they have to, in many cases, take care of families as well as the patients. This is the most stressful, terrible, horrible times of their lives, and a lot of people just need a lot of care. What's been your experience?
It can be really traumatic having someone go into hospice. It's some people view hospice as giving up. I really view hospice as enabling the family to have good quality time together at the end of someone's life, and really equip families to care for their loved ones and care for themselves, so they can really have important conversations, so they can do the things that they want to do, and just spend time together rather than worrying about what the next treatment is or what they're going to do the next day. It provides that under net of support for families.
I think that's actually key, and that's something else that I've heard a lot of patients speak about, and a lot of families, and actually clinicians too. Would you mind maybe talking more about the benefits of hospice? Because I think that that it's seen as a last resort in so many cases. And the word benefit maybe even feels a little bit jarring.
Yep.
But really, I think that there are so many wonderful things that come out of it. And that's why so many people do turn to it. And that's why we're doing this, so that people can learn more about the wonderful aspects that do come out of a really terrible time.
So I'm focusing on the interdisciplinary team. Some of the components that I mentioned before. There's the medical director that oversees all the teams that are assigned to patients. The case manager is the nurse that will also oversee the total care of what's provided with for the patient. So they're providing nursing care, the kind of the clinical side of what's going on. They'll educate families about the diagnosis and the progression of illness and what they can expect. And I think education about this is very important, because the more you know about what's going to happen, the better you can prepare. A social worker is also assigned. The social worker can help the patient and family make arrangements. They can help apply for Medicare. They can help apply for senior services. They can help apply for veteran benefits. There's a lot of different services and things that families and patients qualify for that they may not know that they qualify for, and a social worker can provide that kind of expertise, and also emotional support for caregivers and for patients. Chaplains provide spiritual support for patients and families, and as a chaplain, it was sometimes challenging trying to get into a home, because as soon as someone hears the word chaplain, they're like, religion, forget it. I don't want to. I don't want any part of that. What I like to do is, as a chaplain, I represent either no religion or our religions. But really, what I do is I'm educated in many different philosophies and religions, and I go into someone's home and I take on whatever spirituality or religion they practice, learning their stories and then helping them move forward, and maybe explore and use and have their faith or spirituality and use that as a strength, so that they can face harder times. So I still am classified as a chaplain. I'm a chaplain for the Salem, New Hampshire Fire Department. I love working with the men and women of the department and the men and women of the community. So that's something that really feeds me. Home health aid. I think the home health aid that is assigned to patients is an invaluable resource. They take extra care in providing personal care for patients, and they get to know the patients very intimately just by the nature of their work. I know some wonderful home health aides, and they are, again, a wealth of information about patients, about where they are, about progression of illness, about family dynamics. I think they're a great resource, and they're wonderful people. We also have a bereavement staff. We can provide pre-bereavement. We have counselors that can talk with families and children about the death of a loved one, whether it has occurred or not. We have counseling services that can help people work through difficulties in that. We have volunteers. I can't forget the volunteers. That's who I'm in charge of.
I need to get around to them eventually.
Yeah, we have around 230 volunteers.
Now, somebody might say, why, of everything in the world you can volunteer for, why would you want to volunteer for hospice? Because that must be very special.
I say that not everyone is cut out to work in hospice.
I would imagine. So what makes a good hospice volunteer?
I guess a passion for being with people and providing companionship. Really, a volunteer provides companionship to patients and their families. A number of volunteers volunteer at our High Point House, our hospice house in Haverhill. And they do things ranging from direct care, just in terms of just going and sitting with patients and talking with them.
And this is a non-COVID times, obviously.
Yes, non-COVID
Yep,
time.
Sure, which we will return to.
Yep.
So please continue.
They volunteers work as greeters and in the kitchen staff. We have a coffee and tea kind of cart that sometimes they bring around. We have musicians. We have a wonderful harpist that comes in once a week and will play the harp so that everyone in the whole High Point House can hear. We have a piano player that comes in and plays. We have Reiki, Reiki masters. We have massage therapists. We have a hairdresser available so that people can, patients can have their hair done. I know I'm forgetting, but there's a whole host of people that really just enjoy learning about other people's stories and don't want people to be alone.
Yeah.
And that really has been what has been tough during this COVID time. I always say that the worst thing that you can have is a volunteer with nothing to do.
Yes.
And when you take away in-person visits away from a volunteer and then have them seeing on TV and in the news people dying alone, it's almost like rubbing salt in an open wound. Because they so much want to be with families and know the value of companioning and not wanting anyone to be alone. And again, having someone hear their story. There are also vigil sitters that we have as volunteers, and they will go in homes, or used to go in homes and at High Point House, just so families need a break. It can be very, the time in hospice can be very demanding and very emotional and very tiring. And volunteers can provide that respite time for a caregiver to either go shopping or even just take a nap.
Yeah.
I've had volunteers go into a home and stay for 2 hours and just have the caregiver go upstairs and take a nap.
I can totally see that.
So it really provides a great service. We also, as part of the team, there's also an expression therapist.
What's that?
And she provides music therapy.
Oh.
I loved, again, there's part of me that misses being out in the field and providing direct care, because the team that I worked with was wonderful. All the teams that I've worked with have been wonderful. But our expression therapist travels around to families and plays music and gets patients and families singing. And with dementia patients, music can be very powerful. And can help people remember and can bring people outside of their shells. I guess that is a good way of saying it. Someone who may not be able to put together a sentence after listening to music that means something to them can have a conversation, can at times answer questions, maybe 1 or 2 word answers, but in a much more coherent way.
I saw that with my grandmother. She had Alzheimer's, and when she heard music, she could sing lyrics, but she wouldn't speak otherwise, or she wouldn't necessarily know my name, but she could sing. It was remarkable.
Yep. Seen the power of the song "Somewhere Over the Rainbow," or simple songs, "Somewhere Over the Rainbow," or "You Are My Sunshine" are 2 that she loves. But we would always try and pick music from, if someone was in their 70s, 80s, or 90s, we would try and pick the era when they were between 18 and 25.
Yes. Yeah.
and they would really respond to that.
Yeah. I wonder if that wasn't the happiest time of their lives, maybe.
Yep. Yep. It definitely had some meaning.
Yeah.
So that also was part of the team. I'm trying to think if there are other people.
Well, so let's just pretend for a minute that I'm not a totally amazingly talented musician or an incredible singer, or let's just pretend that I'm not otherwise amazingly fabulous. But could I, for example, go and volunteer, again, non-COVID times? Could I read mail, or could I read a newspaper,
Yes.
or, news on my phone or something?
Yep.
Like, are there things that I could do that are very basic in nature? Or if I wanted to be helpful but maybe was a little bit shy about being in front of people, is there something clerical I could do?
Yes, there is. We do have admin volunteers.
Okay.
We have a volunteer that's putting together admission packets and all other kinds of packets at home. And she's
Really, from home?
She's amazing.
Oh.
We're messaging her all the stuff. She's putting them together, and then we're bringing them back. And we have volunteers that do tuck-in calls.
What is that?
Tuck-in calls happen on Thursday mornings, and it's when patients get called to, and it's a check-in call. We check in to see if the patient is in pain, if they need anything,
Oh, gosh.
if they need any medication, or they're running out of medications. Really just an overall check, and then from that we will, if anything needs to be done, the volunteer will notify the clinical manager.
Oh my God, that's so important. That seems like a critical role.
Yep. I think it alleviates
very
a lot
rewarding.
hopefully it alleviates some stress from the weekend nurses.
Yeah.
But also it's another connection that we have with the patient and family.
Yeah.
It's someone else, whether it's eyes or ears, inside someone's home.
Yes.
And I think that's important because the better we know our patients and their families, the better care
Yes.
we can provide and the more comfortable we can make them. I think that's one of the hard things is when someone is in crisis and they come onto hospice, there isn't a lot of time to get to know them if they pass in a week.
Yeah.
There's a high percentage of people that only are on hospice for a week. Both my grandparents are my grandfather was on hospice for 2 days, and I think my grandmother was on hospice twice that long, for 4. And my father was on hospice for, I think, 4 or 5 days.
I'm sorry, that must have been very hard. Now, why is that? Is it because people don't know? Is it because they're trying to do very curative things until the very end? Or is it maybe just a big combination?
All of the above.
Okay.
I think that's why
I mean,
there
who
needs to be...
wouldn't want to cure things until the very end? I totally would. I would.
I mean,
understand
looking
that.
at it's the quality of life versus quantity of life.
Yeah.
And I think that is looking for quality of life.
Right. Yes, that's what
for
I've learned
hospice. Yep.
in this role. See, that's what I didn't know until I came to this role. So that was my old way of thinking, and now this is what I'm hoping to help people understand as well.
And education, I think, is really important. I think from why people aren't on hospice earlier is because maybe fear.
Yes. Which is where I had come from.
Yep.
A lot of fear-based.
And it might some people might view it as giving up. Some people, and really education. I think educating people about what hospice is, what the benefit is. It's quality of life.
Yeah.
It's not how long can you live. If you can go by going through chemotherapy and you think you'll be able to live an extra 2-3 months, is the pain and all the side effects really worth it?
Yeah.
I think these are the questions that families
Yeah.
need to go through themselves.
As a chaplain, did you have the privilege maybe of being present for or helping to facilitate any really meaningful conversations? Because I think that maybe hospice would present the opportunity for families to address, the most meaningful conversations,
Yep.
like this is our time, or maybe even very lighthearted things too. I mean, this doesn't have to be all. It is, of course, a very serious subject matter, and I don't mean to suggest that it's not, but there is some lighthearted things. There are humorous things, and everybody grieves their own way, and there is humor and there is laughter. I mean, there is everything.
Humor is great therapy.
Yeah,
Sometimes. And one of the things that I enjoy about hospice is every family is different. It really is up to the team to go in and kind of learn about the family, what will help them, what helps. There's no cookie cutter. There's no cookie cutter strategy that you can apply across the board to all families.
Yeah.
And different families need different things because all families are different. Whether you're helping people through some family dynamics, whether some people are having financial stuff, whether you have a son or daughter or a wife that really does want to has been disconnected from a family member, and they really want to be connected back into the family. There are a ton of things. I think one of the most meaningful things that I did was a patient asked me to write a thank you note for them so that he could read it to his friends. And writing that letter.
What was he thanking them for?
Just for friendship.
Oh my God.
But you get that. I have been able to help people either express gratitude to their family, gratitude for their life. Even just, I think presence is powerful.
Yeah.
And just being there, and I think that's important for all the disciplines, is just being there for the patient, for the caregiver, so that they have someone to talk to, or even just to sit. Sometimes silence, not on a podcast, but sometimes silence it can be very powerful.
Yeah.
And very much needed. Because it can provide the space for different things to come out, whether it's something that needs to be said or whether it just needs to be quiet. There are lots of different tools that the clinicians and have that they can use, and that, again, I think that's what makes hospice exciting for me.
Yeah.
And I know it might be weird explaining that or saying that.
No.
Is that everyone's different.
Yeah.
And I get to meet all kinds of different people and hear their stories.
What are your most memorable ones? Or what comes back to you?
Again, I think working with the gentleman and writing a thank you note was very meaningful. I learned how to play 45s.
I don't know how to do that either.
Learned how to play 45s, and I can't believe I lived up in this area for so long and did not know how to play 45s. But again, as a chaplain, you've thought of different. I had to think of different ways of getting into people's homes.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
Because sometimes chaplains can be threatening, and I don't think I'm threatening.
No, you don't
once
scare
you get to this microphone, however, try and think of different ways. I'm like, I can come and play cards.
Yeah.
As we're playing cards and they're beating me, they open up.
Yeah.
And it's that much of a distraction. But and that's perfect for volunteers. Volunteers can go in and play cribbage. They can go in and read the newspaper. They can go in and read Psalms or scripture or whatever religious readings or poems or what have you. That's why we have volunteers. The other thing that I have to mention is we are members of the We Honor Veterans program.
Yes.
By NHPCO, the National Hospice and Palliative Care Organization.
That occurred to me when you were talking about actually the struggle to get to know people and how if you have a little bit more time, you can relate to them. Mm-hmm. And I'm glad you brought that program up because that was something that I had remembered in working with you earlier.
Yep.
And I'd love for you to talk about how that is very meaningful.
So the We Honor Veterans Program is a national program, and it recognizes and understands that veterans have different experiences while they're in the military, and that affect them at end of life. There are, whether someone was in combat, whether someone wasn't in combat, whether they had a traumatic experience, whether they had PTSD, it affects their end of life. So in the We Honor Veterans Program, we have provided workshops that have helped train the clinicians so that when they go in, they can identify if someone has had PTSD or has had any kind of effects from their military service, or the family has any kind of effects from the military service, and how we can better bring comfort and care to them at end of life.
Are all of the volunteers veterans? Or
No.
is that a requirement?
No, we have 11 veteran volunteers right now, and they do visit some veterans. But by and large, what we do is we recognize our veteran service by sending them a card and a pin, and I write a letter thanking them for their service. And then social workers are equipped to help them with veterans benefits. If they're not registered with the VA, help them get registered with the VA as quickly as they can. There is a death benefit that veterans are entitled to. But really, it's equipping our staff people to provide the comfort and care that they need, to recognize that they need extra, when they need extra care, and to be able to refer them to someone if it's above our pay grade. And I'm a huge advocate of networking. I can do a number of different things, but I can't do everything, and that's why I know a whole bunch of people, so that I can refer people to wherever they need to go. So
I think that's the sign of a good manager.
I have a wonderful team. I love working. I love working with everyone that I have the honor of working with.
Well, that also makes you a good manager.
So that's, I'm trying to think of anything else that we need to.
Are there any more examples that you can give from your, I feel like you have such a rich background. I feel like I want to pull more out of you.
I guess the one piece of advice that I have given most often, because I've gotten asked, what should I do?
Yeah. People must be overwhelmed. People don't even know what they don't know.
What should I do? Whether it's go in a hospice, whether it's get a hospital bed, because sometimes people are reluctant to get a hospital bed because it means that someone is progressing, or should I what medication? And my answer is always you need to make the decision that you can live with.
That's beautiful.
And if I get asked, should I go and visit them? Should I not go and visit them? If you can live without not going and visiting that person, then that's the answer. But if you can't live with that, I don't want to give them the answer.
Yeah.
It's not my answer that they need. People need to come up with their own answers. And I think that has been one of the helpful pieces of advice that I've given to families and patients, is make the decision that they can live with.
Is that very difficult, not giving them the answer? Because you probably feel like, I can see this so clearly from my outside perspective. But obviously,
it is.
obviously that's not, that's not necessarily right for them. I understand that.
I think I've been doing it for years, and I don't. The way I justify not giving them the answer is I don't want to give them anything to blame me for. I don't want them to 2 years down the road. You made me do that. I'm like, no, I didn't. It was your, and that might sound a little ridiculous, but
No.
it's something that in working in pastoral care and working with families, it's I put my I guess my stuff aside and
Sure.
really kind of dive into what they need, because
Yeah.
my answer is not their answer. My life is not their life. Their life is not mine. And that was one of the things that I had to get over, because I would take ownership of a lot of people's care.
Well, I'm
And
sure
I-
because you care so much. You
Yep.
probably just care so much and you want to help
Yep.
them.
Yep, but you need to learn you need to learn that it's their life. I am their resource. I am their. We're in a very special relationship with the families, and I respect that. It's an
Yeah.
honor and a privilege to be there. It's an honor and a privilege to work with the volunteers, because they're the ones that want to come in and be with these people. So it's really up to me to equip them to do the best that they can do to provide the best care.
Yeah.
And ultimately, it's all about the patient and family.
Yeah.
And it's all about who we're taking care of. So keeping that in mind, it really helps kind of direct what I do.
Thank you. Well, it's been my honor and privilege to be here with you today.
Well, thank you for having me. I feel privileged being the first guest here.
Well, I love this company. I haven't been here. Haven't been with the company much. What I'm trying to say is, I know you've been here a little over a year. I've been here just about a year. So, but in this time, I've grown to just love and treasure what everybody associated with it does. It's
Yeah.
very important to me. And I feel like I've learned so much in my time that I was looking for other ways to share that. And so this seemed like a natural progression of the work that we do.
Yep.
So it's really, I'm just grateful to you for sharing it with me. Thank you.
You're welcome. I've been with at the end of February, it'll be 3 years. So I was a year and a half.
Oh.
Yeah, a year and a half in this position, and almost a year and a half as a chaplain.
Oh, you've got me way over.
And since I've been in the office, I've gotten to know a lot more people and behind the scenes, and
Yeah.
it is a wonderful company.
Well, everyone is in it for the right reason,
Yep.
and it's nonprofit, and it's helping people
Yep.
at the worst times of their lives. It's making things as okay as they can be.
Yep. And hopefully we're not. It may be one of the worst times in their life, but we're helping support them and alleviate some of the stresses.
Yes.
So that it can be a meaningful part of their life.
Yes. Thank you for saying that. Yeah. And in future episodes of the podcast, I would like to leave this on a, more positive too. So many of the clinicians I've spoken to have gone into their roles because of experiences themselves. I've had a few different hospice nurses say that they were sitting by, one woman especially, I remember, was saying that her father was in hospice, and because of the kindness of a nurse, she went back to school and became a hospice nurse.
Yep.
So there are so many examples of that was why I thought I have to, like you said, it's about the stories.
Yep.
So this is really why I really wanted to launch this, to tell people stories, and yours is critical, and I hope you'll come back.
Oh, thank you for having me. I love sharing the story and really educating about hospice.
Yeah.
I think it's something that we need to continually do.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Eric. And this has been Compassionate Journeys, a podcast about home care and hospice presented by Home Health Foundation. We can be found on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and most anywhere you get your podcasts. Check for past episodes, and please join us next time. Thank you.